At 19, Winona Ryder became a face Hollywood could not escape. Shadowed eyes, an unusual fragility, and a rare ability to make loneliness look beautiful on screen. While other stars of her generation chased bright glamour, Winona stepped out of the darkness. And it was that very darkness that lifted her to the top. But from that moment on, her life began to be examined without mercy. Success arrived too early, too fast. Winona became the symbol of an entire generation, yet behind the applause stood a young woman carrying anxiety, the pressure of fame, and a lingering sense of not belonging. Hollywood loved her image, but did not know where to place her when she refused to grow into familiar molds. One haunting role followed another, and the line between character and real person slowly blurred, leaving a vulnerable soul inside a cold entertainment machine. But it took only one public breakdown to turn the muse of the 90s into a cautionary example of fame's cruelty. From dazzling heights to long years away from the spotlight, Winona Ryder did not just lose her career. She faced pain, isolation, and a quiet battle simply to survive. Her story is not about scandal, but about the price paid when young talent is thrown straight into blinding light. And that was only the beginning. Winona Ryder was born Winona Laura Horowitz in 1971 in Minnesota, into a household whose daily rhythm differed from most homes around it. Her parents, Michael Horowitz and Cynthia Palmer, worked with words, editing and archiving materials. There were more books than decorations. Stacks of papers, unfinished manuscripts, and open documents rested on tables, marked with scraps of paper instead of proper bookmarks. Conversations revolved around literature, intellectual history, and old films, often stretching on without the need to reach conclusions. Thoughts were allowed to pause mid-sentence. Questions could remain unanswered. In that space, listening happened naturally, and silence was not treated as something that needed to be filled. The house was not arranged for the convenience of children, and it functioned more like an open intellectual space where ideas were placed side by side, debated, then left unresolved. The family had connections to figures of the counterculture movement, including Timothy Leary. These names were not introduced as icons nor as warnings. They existed simply as part of the background, passing through stories, books, and adult memories. In her early years, Ryder lived with the Rainbow community in Northern California. Living conditions were simple. No electricity, no television. Days followed natural light. Evenings came early. When darkness fell, activity could not be extended by lamps. Reading and film viewing happened within the limits of dim light, forcing time to slow according to physical conditions. There were no screens to fill empty space. Time was divided between books and films, mostly classic cinema shown through rudimentary means, images sometimes flickering, sound imperfect. Literature and film did not serve as entertainment. They became the primary structure of daily life, organizing rhythm without external stimulation. Ryder read early. The books she encountered were not sorted by age. Among them was J.D. Salinger, and with characters who lived slightly outside society's orbit, quiet, observant, carrying distance from the surrounding world. These images entered her life naturally, without explanation. Her childhood became tied more to language, ideas, and frames of film than to group games or typical school routines. When the family moved to Petaluma, California, and Ryder began attending public school, difference no longer remained in private space. It appeared directly within the group. Her appearance, voice, and presence did not match the majority. Traits that required no label in her previous environment now became visible markers. Teasing began early, not passing jokes, but repeated, deliberate behavior. Conflicts escalated into physical pushing. There were times she was hit, hurt. These incidents happened while she was still very young, in an environment where she had few common points of connection. School, instead of being stable ground, became something to pass through each day with heightened alertness. There was no sense of belonging, no natural shield. After those experiences, school life was no longer a place to invest emotion. Ryder returned to what felt familiar: reading, watching films, staying in private space. Books and cinema played the most stable role in daily routine. They did not comfort or explain. They were simply there, steady, like a parallel rhythm alongside school. The classroom existed as a separate zone, where presence always came with caution. And those years carried Ryder into adolescence with a distinct kind of presence, quiet, sensitive to others' gaze, accustomed to standing at the edge of the group. Later, when she spoke about anxiety, depression, and feeling out of place even during fame, school memories and the early countercultural environment often appeared as background, not to explain but to restore chronological order. When Ryder began attending auditions, she did not enter as a teenager groomed for the entertainment industry. There was no image training, no positioning strategy. Her rhythm had already been formed through books, philosophy, cinema, and years of being outside the group. Her difference was not created to attract attention. It had existed long before the camera began to record it. In 1986, Winona Ryder made her first appearance on the big screen in Lucas. Her role was not placed at the center of the story. The character existed at the edges of relationships, speaking little and observing more. In scenes that included Ryder, the film's rhythm slowed. Gazes were held longer. Silences stretched beyond necessity. Despite limited screen time, that presence created a subtle pause in the narrative flow. On set, Ryder was not asked to heighten emotions. She stayed precisely in position, reacting just enough for the scene to continue. Small details, the way she stood still, the way she looked aside instead of straight ahead, remained in the final cut. The role did not create a major impact, but it left an early sign of the kind of presence Ryder would carry forward. A year later, A Square Dance, 1987, continued placing Ryder in the space of young characters living amid family fractures. Her character largely existed in a state of listening and endurance. Emotion was not expressed through climaxes, but through remaining in the frame when everything around her became uncomfortable. The film passed through theaters quietly, yet the role reinforced a familiar rhythm. Ryder did not try to claim the center, only to keep the character from being pushed out of alignment. When the two films were released consecutively, Ryder's image began to be recognized along a clear trajectory. Young characters, few words, carrying a sense of separation. These roles came when she was still very young, before she had the chance to experiment with other modes of presence. Her professional rhythm formed slowly, but enough to open the next phase, where attention toward Ryder began to intensify. In 1988, Ryder was invited to meet Tim Burton for Beetlejuice. She was about 15. The meeting unfolded differently from typical auditions. Ryder went alone, not wanting her parents to accompany her or wait outside. There was no display or visible rebellion, only an early need to keep personal space, even while standing before a system far larger than herself. The initial conversation did not revolve around the script. Now, Ryder and Burton spoke about Edward Gorey, classic films, and dark imagery with internal order. For a while, Ryder did not even realize the man she was speaking to was the director. There was no standard line reading, no requirement to perform a scene. After the conversation had flowed long enough, Burton offered her the role almost immediately. During production, Burton did not direct by controlling every detail. He set a rhythm and a point of view for Ryder, then allowed the rest to operate on its own. For such a young actress, that approach created a rare sense of safety. Lydia Dietz was formed not by emphasizing difference, but by maintaining an unbroken inner state, never forced to explain itself. When Beetlejuice was released, Lydia Dietz quickly existed as an image separate from the film itself. Ryder was remembered through specific details: deep black clothing, straight dark hair, a gaze often placed off-center within the frame. Lydia stood still longer than necessary, shoulders slightly closed, letting the surrounding emptiness create distance. That image spread quickly, repeated, and soon gathered into a symbol of difference. Ryder did not leave the set intending to build a style or pursue a long-term aesthetic role. The choices in Beetlejuice emerged from very specific working conditions: dark wardrobe maintained, cold lighting that did not soften the face, performance kept low so the story could move on its own. Lydia existed as a role that met a matching temperament, and that alignment caused the image to cling to Ryder earlier than she had time to realize how she was being seen. In 1989, Heathers came to Ryder in a way unlike any previous career step. The script reached her through writing circles and almost immediately created an irresistible pull. Ryder actively sought out director Michael Lehmann's phone number and called him directly, not to discuss image or negotiate position. She spoke about the character, about the feeling that she needed to be in that film, even willing to participate without pay. The Heathers draft at the time was unusually long, over 300 pages, carrying a dark tone difficult to condense. During filming, Ryder kept nearly every trace: the script, the Westerberg High student card, small props, handwritten notes. These items were not souvenirs, but evidence of a choice made in full awareness, a commitment not based on safe prospects. Heathers did not become an immediate commercial success. The film was revisited, passed along, and gradually existed as a cult classic. Veronica Sawyer, intelligent, weary, caught between complicity and resistance, expanded Ryder's character trajectory, moving darkness beyond aesthetic territory into the concrete experience of late 1980s American youth. On the other side of the system, consequences appeared early and quietly. Heathers was seen as a difficult choice, too dark and too sensitive to attach to familiar commercial molds. Ryder began to be removed from certain projects, not through public statements, but through quiet refusals. From there, a new tension formed in her professional trajectory, not between success and failure, but between artistically weighted choices and the market's tightening demand for safety. In 1990, Edward Scissorhands placed Winona Ryder in a quiet suburban setting where everything moved according to familiar routines. Kim appeared in that world as an ordinary girl. Light-colored clothes, cautious gestures, quick reflexes when faced with something unfamiliar. When Edward entered, Kim did not move closer. She stepped back, kept her distance, and looked longer than necessary. Fear was neither hidden nor pushed into dramatic peaks. It remained there, clear, then stretching across multiple beats. Scenes of Kim watching Edward often contained little dialogue. Ryder held her gaze steady, moved minimally, allowing the empty space within the frame to speak. When Kim began to change, the shift happened in very small ways. Standing still a moment longer, a slower gesture, a moment of not turning away. There was no explosive turning point. The relationship formed through accumulation, repeated instances of remaining in the same space. On set, that state was sustained through concrete working conditions. Cold scenes were not artificially warmed for comfort. Breath appeared on camera. Hands tightened from the chill. Movements slowed naturally. The body reacted to the environment, and those reactions went directly into the frame. Ryder did not need to adjust much. The state already existed within the shooting space. But when the film was released, audiences responded directly. Edward Scissorhands earned about $86 million worldwide. Kim's image was remembered not for decisive action or memorable lines, but for stillness, a girl watching her familiar world shift slightly and not turning away. From here, Ryder continued to be seen through that mode of presence. Few words, many silences, a rhythm becoming clearer with each role. Her schedule grew denser. Gaps between projects shortened. Ryder arrived on set on time, stood at marked positions, listened to directions, then returned to the dressing room. The workflow was smooth, uninterrupted. Yet the way she entered each scene had changed. Fewer unnecessary movements, less direct emotional display. Everything was held back for the precise moment required. Some roles during this period almost did not allow emotion to surface outwardly. Ryder held her gaze one beat longer when needed, lowered her eyes at the right moment so the story could move forward without extra words. On set, small slips of paper were passed around. Brief notes focused only on physical placement, stopping points, breathing between lines. Performance was adjusted in millimeters, not climaxes. Then came longer scenes, more dialogue, where Ryder stood at the center of the frame. Emotion opened, but did not spill over. When characters argued, the voice did not break. When determined, steps moved straight ahead, unhurried. When climax approached, Ryder stopped at the exact point, letting silence do the rest. These scenes remained in the final cut without added music or emphasis. Success arrived alongside tighter schedules, and yet the working method did not change. Ryder's image appeared frequently on posters and magazine covers, drawing her face into conversations about a generation, about skepticism, about youth standing between two edges. While labels circulated quickly, Ryder carried familiar objects: folded handwritten call sheets, scripts marked along the margins, old notes with fading ink. They stayed in her bag, in dressing room drawers, moving with her from project to project. Between 1991 and 1994, Ryder entered a phase where difference no longer lay in which projects she chose, but in how she learned to exist within increasingly structured cinematic systems. Schedules intensified, workspaces shifted constantly, yet her preparation remained steady. Thick printed scripts read in silence, low-key scenes lightly marked in margins, call sheets folded into quarters in her bag. On the dressing table, small handwritten notes were placed side by side, just enough for a quick glance before stepping into frame. In the age of innocence, Ryder entered an environment where every movement was minimized. Heavy costumes, high collars, tight layers restricted motion, slowing and making each gesture deliberate. Standing in frame, she could not move freely. Each step forward, and each turn of the head passed through layers of fabric and the gaze already waiting. The body was restrained, forcing reaction to occur internally before appearing outward. On set, Ryder worked directly with very short handwritten notes. Not psychological guidance, but physical adjustments. Stand half a step aside, hold the gaze longer, pause before speaking. These slips of paper were passed quickly, without explanation. Ryder read them, folded them, tucked them into the script. When the scene was shot again, the change appeared precisely at the marked point. No more, no less. In many dialogue scenes, Ryder held her gaze fixed, not trying to explain emotion through facial expression. When reaction was required, the change unfolded slowly. A blink delayed slightly, a lowered tone at the end of a sentence, a moment of not turning away even when the script allowed it. These adjustments were small enough to miss on first viewing, yet created sustained tension between what was spoken and what remained unspoken. Some shooting days revolved around adjusting a very small beat. Ryder stood in the same position, repeating takes, each time removing one more movement. When the camera stopped, she did not leave the frame immediately. Her body remained in position for a few seconds, waiting for the sensation to settle before stepping out. This method did not produce dramatic peaks, but produced compression, a feeling that appears only when an actor controls even the part that is not performed. Alongside that highly disciplined space, Ryder continued working within very different cinematic structures, where scale was larger and pace faster. Even as settings changed, the way she entered a scene remained the same. Arriving early, standing at the marked position, keeping her voice low, not raising it to dominate the space. Her gaze did not seek response. Emotion was held back, so it would not dissolve into the whole. After the Age of Innocence, the way Winona Ryder entered subsequent roles began to shift noticeably. She sought fewer showcase moments, instead holding characters through a chain of very small adjustments repeated across scenes. Acting was no longer about releasing emotion, but about managing space, time, and silence. Handwritten notes from this period were still kept, like a professional reference system, each role handled with precision, without display. Throughout this phase, Ryder's way of preserving professional memory remained physical. Old scripts were never closed away. Slips of paper with notes stayed tucked inside printed pages. Call sheets were folded along the same crease, growing worn with time. They moved with her from one set to another, not to revisit achievements, but to maintain a work discipline formed very early, where each role was only a small step in a long, continuous process, not something to be named a peak. From the mid-1990s, Ryder's professional momentum did not slow. It expanded horizontally, pulling her into work environments demanding different kinds of endurance. Projects followed one another, each carrying its own form of pressure, not erupting into crisis, but accumulating steadily over time. Ryder still arrived on schedule, still completed the work. Yet the rhythm of labor grew heavier in ways difficult to detect within individual scenes. In films centered on memory, family, and inner life, the work did not require dramatic peaks, but demanded sustained presence. Characters had to remain in frame long enough for emotional layers to stack. Ryder held such scenes with patience, standing still, listening more than speaking, letting the story pass through the body without emphasis. These roles did not create large waves, but required the actor to carry emotional weight across many consecutive shooting days. When entering more psychologically dense scripts, the work environment grew enclosed and concentrated. Dialogue was heavy, emotions kept in a constant state of tension. Ryder did not detach from the character when the camera stopped. In the evenings, she reread scripts in silence, marking passages that needed to remain low in tone to avoid pushing too far the next day. But fatigue did not arrive suddenly, but accumulated slowly and evenly, with no clear point of release. Pressure shifted again when Ryder entered large-scale commercial projects. Sets widened, crews grew, shooting schedules locked tightly to release dates. There, she worked not only with character, but with expectations tied to brand. Her familiar approach, restraint, precision, minimal display, did not always align with structures requiring intensity and symbolic force. The responses that followed did not deny her ability, but placed her within a space not designed for her rhythm. Alongside acting, Ryder became more deeply involved in project formation. On a late-decade psychological film, she participated from script development discussions, exchanging ideas about story structure and character approach. Taking on a production role was not about image control, but about keeping stories of mental life from being pushed aside. On set, responsibility increased while no workload decreased. When the film was completed, attention focused on another face. Ryder stepped back, maintaining the familiar habit of someone accustomed to not occupying all the light, even in a project she helped shape from the beginning. At that point, Ryder began to see roles as spaces to touch what is rarely named: anxiety, vulnerability, prolonged emotional fragility. These conversations occurred within her handling of characters, and not expressed outwardly in words. In public, she still appeared on schedule, answered briefly, kept her tone even, not extending into areas not yet arranged. The dense working rhythm lasting many years left traces slowly. There was no single moment clear enough to name change. Only consecutive shooting days, breaks too short for recovery, responsibilities layering without time to settle. Ryder continued working, continued arriving on time, yet psychological weight was already there, quiet, steady, not yet visible. In 2000, Ryder appeared in Autumn in New York within a still unbroken work rhythm, when her name remained central in large commercial projects. The role came as a natural continuation of her choices at the time, a romantic story told at a slow tempo, placing emotion in atmosphere rather than climax. On the New York set, Ryder worked in her usual way, keeping the tone low, not expanding the image. The character existed through stillness, gazes held longer, reactions arriving slowly, emotion not explained outwardly. When the film reached theaters and performed well at the box office, Ryder's presence did not trigger a new shift. The role remained there, completing its function, just before the professional momentum began to fracture in ways not yet named. In 2001, that momentum broke at a very specific point, and not at a press conference or on a film set, but outside the glass doors of Saks Fifth Avenue in Manhattan on a winter afternoon. There was no cinematic framing, just a crowded sidewalk, store lights reflecting on glass, and a few cameras already raised before the story had fully taken shape. In the days that followed, Ryder's image appeared everywhere in an entirely different way. No longer film posters or controlled publicity photos. Instead, hurried snapshots, head lowered while walking fast, coat collar pulled high, face caught at the most unflattering angles, headlines pressed tightly against her name, repeating the same phrase, the same angle, as if an entire career had been compressed into a few cold frames. The media did not need extra detail. The images did the work on their own. On studio desks, project folders were pushed aside. Shooting schedules were quietly adjusted without formal notice. Calls that had once arrived regularly stopped. Ryder was never told directly that she was being rejected. She sensed it through absence, scripts no longer coming, meetings canceled, projects once in discussion, dissolving without closure. In industry language, she became uninsurable, a concise label enough to close every door without debate. Daily life narrowed into small details. Mornings with no call times, days without makeup rooms, without sets to arrive at on schedule. Ryder stayed home more, moved less. Call sheets, thick printed scripts, folded notes lay untouched in drawers. Time passed not through new projects, but through keeping tomorrow similar to today. Yet Ryder nearly withdrew from Hollywood Center in ways visible through physical signs. No more dense shooting calendars, no more back-to-back premieres. Instead, fixed daytime appointments, probation requirements, community service, regular appearances in places, without red carpets or waiting cameras. Simple clothing, moving alone. These appearances created no new headlines, yet held her public image frozen in place. During this period, work did not vanish entirely, but separated from central attention. Ryder read scripts at home, met very few people, declined many offers with unclear working rhythms. Professional habits once tied to high intensity were reduced. Later starts, stable routines, less travel. There was no announcement of retreat, no push for an early return. Recovery unfolded quietly, not attached to any single project that could be retold as a comeback. After 2006, Winona Ryder returned along a different trajectory. There was no major leading role to market, no accompanying image campaign. She appeared within already functioning film structures, did the assigned work, then stepped away. Short screen time, dialogue just sufficient. Yet her placement was always precise enough to hold the emotional rhythm for scenes before and after. The camera did not follow her long, but could not overlook her. In projects from this phase, Ryder rarely stood at the center of the frame. She appeared as a counterweight, entering scenes later, standing slightly off-axis, leaving earlier than others. Her familiar working method remained: arriving early, standing at the marked spot, speaking concisely, withdrawing when the scene ended. The recognition that followed was quiet, so often confined to short remarks. Precise, well-placed, holds the space. There was no wave of repositioning. Work continued steadily, no longer tied to generational expectations or leading roles. By the early 2000s, that working rhythm had become a stable state. Ryder did not return to the center, nor did she stand outside. She existed in a quieter zone of the profession, where each role was handled as an independent task, neither carrying the past as compensation nor needing to prove anything further. In 2016, Ryder appeared in Stranger Things in a completely different rhythm. There was no traditional premiere, no opening night to gauge reaction. Episodes were released all at once, spreading rapidly across borders without pause. Ryder entered a long-form structure she had never experienced before. A story unfolding over years, a character not resolved in 2 hours, but required to endure across episodes. Joyce Byers appeared in confined spaces, low-ceiling living rooms, narrow hallways, fluorescent-lit stores. Ryder placed the character in constant motion, quick steps, abrupt stops, frequent turns. The phone held tight to the ear, doors opening and closing repeatedly, the gaze rarely still. When speaking, words came in rushes. When silent, the body remained tense, as if sound had only just been cut off. And these details were not pushed into isolated climaxes. They repeated and accumulated. Joyce stood before blinking lights, hands trembling slightly as she touched each bulb. She sat close to walls, coat still on indoors. When desperation rose, Ryder did not widen the performance range. Emotion was held within small shifts. Faster breathing, uneven speech rhythm, gaze sliding away from the person in front of her. That state followed Joyce across seasons, becoming a condition of living rather than a temporary reaction. As the cinematic world expanded into supernatural elements, Joyce remained anchored in ordinary actions, making phone calls at night, driving along empty roads, searching through belongings, waiting in rooms where no one answered. Ryder did not place the character in a position of control. Joyce could not explain anything. She simply stayed long enough, steady enough, to react to what exceeded normal endurance. Because of that, within an increasingly complex structure, the character kept the story from drifting away from the ground. Seasons followed one another, shooting schedules stretched, the gap between individual film projects disappeared. Ryder appeared consistently, holding the same performance rhythm over years, not adjusting the character to external expectations. And the recognition that followed did not pull her back to the center of discourse. Work continued in the familiar way. Enter the role, hold the rhythm, step away. Joyce Byers was not created to become a new icon. The character existed as an extended state of anxiety, exhaustion, and persistence under conditions that did not allow rest. Within that state, another professional rhythm formed, slower, more enclosed, without any declared return. The character remained on screen long enough to do her own work. A new working pace continued to operate. Projects arrived steadily, enough to remain present, without the need to generate peaks. Ryder did not enter the frame to prove anything. She held her position through professional discipline, through the ability to stand in the right place and keep the right tempo. And there remained a part of life that did not stand under the lights. It did not follow Ryder onto red carpets, did not accompany prearranged questions. That part existed at a distance from the ongoing career, slower, more private, carrying weight not easily visible from outside. In 1989, during the preparation and filming of Edward Scissorhands, Ryder met Johnny Depp. Both were at a particular moment. Young enough not yet to have protection from attention, yet already visible enough not to move through ordinary life unseen. The film set became their first shared space, where time was divided by shooting schedules, intimacy forming through waiting hours, repeated scenes, late wrap-ups when crews were tired and no longer performing for display. After the film ended, their private lives no longer had a clear boundary from the outside world. Now, Ryder and Depp appeared together in very ordinary places, outside theaters after crowds dispersed, on busy sidewalks, entering and leaving hotels before adjusting their steps. There was no preparation, no buffer. Cameras were often already raised before they realized they were being watched. Hasty photographs preserved unfinished details, uneven steps, hands not yet separated, eyes turning away mid-movement. These images were quickly placed side by side, repeated in the same framing, until two separate people were compressed into a single image. But that pause rarely lasted. When a door opened, lights came on again. Stepping outside meant the rhythm immediately accelerated. New images kept appearing, covering gaps just as they formed. Private life did not disappear, but was constantly shortened, divided, squeezed between moments of being seen, as if stillness existed only in narrow cracks, enough to pass through, not enough to remain. Over time, the shared image was repeated more densely. Private details were extracted, enlarged, repeated like symbols. The rest, moments when they were not together, days without photographs, had no place in the public narrative. The relationship existed alongside high professional intensity, unable to separate into its own pace. Around 1993, their joint appearances ended. There was no statement, no clearly marked moment. The cameras simply no longer captured them in the same frame. Work schedules continued, but in different directions. Questions surfaced briefly, then faded as there were no new images to pursue. From then on, Ryder's romantic life changed how it existed. It did not disappear, but retreated deeply from public view. It no longer stood beside someone else to form a ready-made narrative frame. Bonds no longer accompanied publicity schedules or supplemented professional image. If closeness existed, it occurred outside the lights, in spaces not needing proof, not needing to be seen, not needing to be preserved for retelling. There was once, during work, when Winona Ryder was touched in a way that did not belong to the scene. Not before the camera. No action cue, no professional reason to justify it. It happened quickly, in a closed space where she had to be present to continue that day's work. No one stopped. No one named what had just occurred. The next scene was prepared as usual. Ryder did not respond verbally. She stepped back half a pace, adjusted her clothing, kept her gaze neutral. When the assistant called her to position, she moved to the marked spot on the floor, stood straight, and waited for the camera to roll. No argument, no interruption. The work continued. After that incident, very small things began to change. Winona Ryder no longer stayed on set once her scenes were finished. When a door closed, she was the one who left first. In tight spaces, she always kept enough distance to avoid turning her back. If a private exchange was necessary, she stood near an exit, These adjustments were never discussed. They unfolded quietly, repeated each day, like a new habit the body formed on its own. She still arrived on time, still completed her scenes. But the working rhythm was no longer the same. Rooms that had once been just settings began to carry tension. When standing still, her body no longer relaxed. In conversation, her eyes often shifted away sooner than needed. Vigilance entered the smallest gestures, subtle enough that others did not notice, strong enough that she could not forget. Years later, Ryder spoke about the experience. She did not give details or name specific acts. She said the hardest part was continuing to work while a place once considered safe no longer felt that way. Not explosive fear, but prolonged tension, present every day, requiring constant self-control. At the same time, outside pressure did not lessen. In the early 2000s, Ryder appeared before cameras with a steady face, brief answers, and even tone. But beyond work schedules, her body reacted differently. Sleep broke into fragments. She woke still exhausted. Some days she rose only to complete the work already accepted. Medication entered not as a choice, but as a tool to keep functioning, to sleep through the night, to leave the house in the morning. Ryder later acknowledged experiencing depression and misusing pain medication, not to seek intensity, but to remain stable enough to work. There was no appeal for attention, no public telling at the time. Ryder did not bring the experience into public light. She held it in small adjustments of daily life. How she stood in closed rooms, how she left earlier than necessary, how she stayed silent even when she could speak. That silence was not denial. It was a survival reflex in an environment where speaking up did not yet feel safe. What Ryder carried did not lie in the milestones most often repeated. It lived in how she worked across individual projects. On set, she kept very physical habits. Arriving earlier than call time, reading scripts in silence, marking low-tone passages with faint pencil lines. When stepping into a scene, she stood at the designated mark, not adjusting further unless necessary. Changes, if any, were always small. A gaze held a second longer, a pause before a line, a step not taken, even when the frame allowed. Over time, this method became a stable anchor for complex stories. Ryder did not create moments to be remembered. She kept characters intact within the film's structure, allowing other narrative lines to move around her without collapse. Audiences recognized Ryder not through climaxes, but through the feeling that everything remained steady when she was present in the frame. Now 54, Ryder lives between New York and California, not tied to a fixed social address in Hollywood. Much of her time unfolds outside public spaces. No dense appearance schedules, no habitual social circuits. When not filming, she moves through compact routines, reading printed scripts, revisiting old films, staying home more than traveling. Recent public appearances show a restrained image. Simple clothing, minimal gestures. On red carpets or at premieres, she stands straight, answers briefly, does not shift conversation toward private life. Her presence does not perform. It resembles a task completed and then closed. Ryder continues to take roles, but at a slower pace. Projects come steadily, not in waves. She does not expand into producing or executive roles. Each part is handled as an independent job. Arrive, work, leave. She does not return to the center of power, nor recreate former images. She holds the position of a long-working actor, accustomed to discipline rather than attention. Her personal life remains private. Ryder has not married, has no children, and rarely speaks about relationships. Sparse information that appears usually concerns staying home more, maintaining steady habits formed after the crisis period of the early 2000s. No noise, no full retreat. Everything unfolds in between. quiet enough to exist, flexible enough to continue working. Winona Ryder does not stand as an icon, and she is present as someone who has been in the industry long enough to understand both her own limits and the system's. She does not seek to appear younger or prove endurance. She simply continues to live and work within an adjusted rhythm, slower, more private, yet still holding the discipline formed very early. That journey does not form an easily readable arc. There is no highest point to pause at, no ending moment to frame. Ryder moves through different industry structures, keeping a consistent tempo, in the right place, at the right time, leaving when the task is done. The story ends there, not with a statement, but with a familiar state, an actor entering the frame in a way shaped long ago, precise, restrained, allowing the work to unfold on its own.